Hi everyone, I'm Beth, I'm a member of Elections Committee and I'm here with Poppy, who is running for the position of CUSU GU Welfare and Rights Officer. So before we get going on our questions, I've just got a few announcements. So first, everybody please remember that voting will open at midnight on Tuesday the 1st of March and will close at 7 PM on Thursday the 3rd. Tomorrow night, very exciting, we have hustings at 7 PM in Mill Lane Lecture Room 1. So please come along with any questions that you wish to ask the candidates directly. We'll also be running road shows. So on the 1st and 2nd of March, we will be on Sidgwick site, and on the 3rd, we will be on Downing site. Those will be from 10:30 AM to 1 PM, and that will involve members of Elections Committee with tablets so you can all vote and handing out neutral voting information, and then also any candidates who wish to come along and campaign around us. So it's a good opportunity to ask some questions then as well. Finally, there are two other candidates in this election, one of which is Sophie Buck, who has her own video available on her Facebook page answering the same questions that Poppy's going to be answering now. And the other candidate is Ron, which is reopen nominations. Ron's the candidate in every election. So Poppy and I are going to go straight into the questions now. So the first question is, of the points on your manifesto, which is your number one priority?
So my number one priority is probably holding all of the colleges and all of the faculties accountable to the welfare charter that I've been working on, and the Accessible Education Pledge, which me and the education officer have been working on. Because getting people to sign up to it this year is one thing, but then making sure that it carries on and doesn't sort of fizzle out, and all of the colleges actually do provide equal provision or start providing it happens. And a big part of the welfare charter I'm really hoping to do is a student-led review of all of the colleges and all the faculties, because just relying on the university to do their triannual review it doesn't hold them accountable, and it doesn't keep the momentum. I mean, 3 years is like an entire undergraduate degree, and not involving students isn't really being student-led. So yeah, that's a big thing that I want to do, and part of that is going to be a lot to do with supporting PhD students in particular, because I think they're really under-supported in terms of the fact that if you're doing a research student, you can have just very little structure available for you, and that can be really difficult. And you can also get here and particularly master's students, you arrive and you just don't know where to go for resources, and if you're only here for 9 months, that's going to have a really big impact on you. And then another really big part of that is making sure that training is enforced for all of the staff beyond it just being how the university works, which is what it is at the moment. So I think that tutor training should include like training on skills that you can only learn in person, and so like pastoral interactive skills, etc., whereas things like about how the university works could be done online, so the times that are already put aside for that stuff could be better used, basically.
Great. So the next question is, what do you think is the biggest problem facing the welfare of students in Cambridge?
So I don't think that there actually is one biggest problem, because all students are very different and they all have different welfare needs. And this was a point that I made in the review of graduate representation as well, is that, for example, the welfare needs of graduate students are so varied and so diverse because of all of their various intersectionalities. But also the welfare of graduate students is so different from the welfare of undergraduate students in so many ways. So I wouldn't sort of think that there's one thing that needs fixing and then everything would be like great, because there's actually a lot of stuff. And one of the biggest parts of that is the perception of welfare and disability throughout the university. I think my opponent didn't realize that mental health is a disability, and that like having an academic understanding of mental health, for example, isn't necessarily the same as empathizing with someone in that position, and that's something that I'm always experiencing when I'm talking to members of staff throughout the university, because they're obviously very academically well qualified, but they still see the people who are coming for the welfare as a separate entity to them. And that's really difficult because welfare is something that affects everyone and it's relevant to everyone. And it's difficult, unless people realize that, it's hard to be able to make sure that they're accessing it, I guess. So yeah, and so one thing that I'm hoping to do next year is develop an app, which I've already started a bit of work on, but obviously it's an app, so it's a pretty massive project, which is going to try and take down some of the barriers between accessing support and make it like a normal thing. So I'm hoping that we can get it developed over the summer and it can go on all the freshers' phones. We can tell them to like download this cool Cambridge app when they start, and that's going to basically have all of the different support services that's available in Cambridge in one place, and you go on it and you basically like say like, oh, I'm in this kind of position. They'll be like, oh, there's actually like a place to go for that, and it's here, and do you want us to like make an appointment for you or not? So kind of making it something that you've got on you when there's a crisis, but also something that's like super easy to sort out, and it doesn't mean like showing up at the counselling service or showing up somewhere being like, I'm a person with a problem. It's something that's for all students. So yeah.
Great. What is the biggest change that you would like to see in relation to welfare at the university?
So I guess that this links in with some of the things that I've said on some of my posters, which is about welfare becoming a matter of reputation to the university. So something that's, it's been quite controversial this year is what Rob, the education officer, and I have worked on, which is removing the Tompkins table, because we felt like having that huge pressure, on like the only thing that matters is how many firsts the college has got, isn't necessarily great for the welfare of the students of that college. It doesn't mean that that's being the thing that's being prioritised. And I really want welfare to become a matter of reputation, so that there's an incentive for colleges to be really doing their best to think about the students. And so the student review that I was talking about earlier, we really want to have that as a way of like celebrating best practice and be like, whoa, look at this college, like, they might not get all of the firsts, but also they're really nice and you'd actually have a nice time if you went there. And I also think that's so important for students when they're applying, because if I know that I need a certain thing in terms of my own happiness, like I'm going to want to know what college I can get that at, and otherwise all you've got is this table of how many firsts people have got at a college to get around that. The other really, really big change I want is for all staff to participate in the equality and diversity training, which is already compulsory for them, but at all but one of the faculties, the actual number of people who've done it is less than 50%, and that's just not great, especially because it's really easy and it's just online and it's really short. So I feel like everyone should be getting that, and there should be like a refresher each term, to be honest. And I think just that alone can make such a big difference.
Okay, great. The next question is, what challenges do you anticipate in being welfare officer?
So there's a lot of challenges. I don't really know where to start with this one. It's not like being a welfare officer in a college. It's not just being a really, really nice person and feeling good about it at all. It's about determination and not letting yourself get worn down by not being able to fix things for people straight away, or not knowing if you will be able to fix something for someone, and developing the emotional resilience so that you can actually cope with that, and at the same time be juggling all the other demands of the job. It's about like working with people in the advice service and seeing them choosing to make something that is a mistake, but you can't tell them not to go down that route, because ultimately you're trying to empower them to make their own decision. And it's seeing all of the people go through the same kind of things that you went through yourself, and finding it hard to get people to take those things seriously on a higher level, like things like raising an issue that is happening to students all the time at committee and people laughing about it when you've been in that position is a really difficult thing to deal with. And I'm happy, like I'm so glad that I've got a year's worth of experience now, because having to be president of the GU and welfare and rights officer had to make me so hard-headed, and like I cannot believe how like resilient I have become over the last 6 months. But I can now juggle so many things at a time, and I'm not afraid to be assertive, and I'm not afraid to really like fight for the rights of students, because like I know that I know so much, like I know that I know what I'm talking about, and often I know like much more than anyone else in the room, even though automatically I think like, wow, I'm with these amazing academics. Like, they are amazing in their field, but also I know what I'm talking about, and I know that if I want things to change, I have to like be determined. But then that's one aspect. I guess another aspect is people actually comprehending what you're talking about. So, like I said before, people seeing, for example, disabled students as something other, despite the fact that we've just had this statistic from the NUS saying 8 in 10 students struggling with mental health condition. People still don't see that as like I'm more likely to be of one or two genders. Like I'm more likely to have a mental health condition than I was to be this gender or something like that. And that I just don't. It's really, really difficult when the fact that people see all of these things as just disability and it's just a box, when actually like 92% of disabilities are unseen. So that's really annoying, and I look forward to being able to share that with a disabled students officer. And yeah, the final ones are just like making sure that you dedicate enough time to graduate students' welfare, because like people just don't think about it. CUSU doesn't necessarily think about it as much as often as it could, and equally the university doesn't necessarily think about it all the time, and I don't really know why that is. Maybe it's because you don't have all of these people like in one place in your college where it's very obvious and you can't forget about them. Of course, the graduate tutors, like, they're thinking about graduates all the time, but in other committees I'm sitting on, Chad, the president, and I have had to sort of raise things like, why graduates only mentioned as an afterthought here? Why isn't this all applicable to graduates? Like, what about the graduate version of this? Is there one? Have you thought about that? So that's, yeah, just remembering to do that, having not been a grad yourself was a big challenge for me, and it's something I've learned. And making sure that everything I do is student-led is just so hard, because obviously students are so busy. And I guess the easiest way to do that is trying to make it as easy as possible for students to be telling you what to do. But yeah, it can be difficult to know how to make it as easy as possible, what that means. Yeah.
Right, we're going to go through the next few reasonably quickly, if that's
Sorry.
all right. No, not at all. Just we don't want to run out of time. So the next one is a bit mean, I'm afraid. Is why should people vote for you?
Okay. So I guess all of the things that I've achieved in the last 8 months, especially bearing in mind that for the first 6 months of that, I was also rescuing the GU as president of that. I guess, yeah, just the stuff that I've done over the last 2 months in particular shows how much I could do if I could be the officer, like, and just the welfare officer for a full year. Like, I think I've really made a difference in terms of what it's like for college welfare officers. Previously, like, it was a really time inefficient system for them, where where they were all doing their own thing and separately, whereas together, now I've tried to sort of bring them all together. And one of the things that I've got is the Welfare Network Forum, which is for any student of the university to come and discuss issues to do with welfare. And that's on a fortnightly basis, and the welfare officers are invited to that as well, and it's a way for them to share ideas and link up. So one of the things we're doing next term, which has come as a result of the Welfare Network Forum, is that I'm doing quite a lot of events in this building, in the Students' Union. For example, I'm doing a Meet the Animals event, which is going to include lots of fluffy animals, and it's going to be great. But also things like a mocktail and swing night, and like spoken words, speakeasy, and like displays of students' art, like we've had like our craft sessions, but trying to expand that to like be not just craft, like arts as well. Yeah, like really, I've really tried to make it a lot more efficient and pool those resources so that it's easier for welfare officers to be welfare officers, if that makes sense. Yeah, and also because I think that I've made some pretty massive changes in the last 2 months. The universities, like I've done loads of work on the intermission process. It's hopefully a lot better now. All the colleges actually have one universal policy on it. It's flexible, it's not one size fits all, and it's not horrible to students. So I'm really excited for when that gets finalised. And getting training for DOSs and supervisors has been such a big achievement. I kind of can't believe that I've actually achieved that. So that's great.
Right. Okay, so we're going to go on now to how would you divide your time between the roles of welfare and rights?
Okay, so I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a big divide. Often I'm trying to make sure that students' rights are reflected in the welfare provisions that they receive, like by making sure that for example, by making sure that what is out there includes students whose rights might have been overlooked, and yeah, it's something another thing I'm trying to address in the Welfare Charter and the Accessible Education Pledge. Like for one of the things in the Welfare Charter is that all of the colleges need to have gender neutral dress codes and gender neutral policies, because otherwise the rights of non-binary students are just completely ignored. And one of the things in the pledge that has already been committed to, which is great, is that student support documents are always going to be followed through, like as a matter of priority, whereas now it's a sort of like, if they happen to know what a student support document is and feel like doing some extra work, they'll follow it through. And then, yeah, like in a more one or the other way, I guess things like welfare officer training, the actual practice of the advice service and support and provision is the kinds of stuff that I see coming under welfare, whereas like the political committee representation side and doing campaigns is what I see as coming under the rights aspect of it.
Okay, great. Next question is, how do you see your role intersecting with sabbatical officers, which I suppose we can then do in conjunction with the next one, which is specifically with the new CUSU Disabled Students Officer?
Okay, so I guess I mentioned a lot of the stuff that I've been doing with the Education Officer. We're just waiting for final outcomes to be announced about the class list and Tompkins table, which will hopefully be in the very near future and will be good news. I'm doing a lot of stuff with, I've done quite a lot of stuff with the Women's Officer, which has been really great in terms of things like creating the university sexual harassment policy, and something that I'm doing with the Access Officer next term is we're going to provide an alternative guide to May Weeks, because May Week can be so inaccessible for students because of obvious things like it's just incredibly expensive. So we're going to be trying to work on that. But then there's a lot of ways that I'd really like to do much more than I already do with the other SAB officers. It would be really great to be able to work with the coordinator to help me throw lots of the events that I want to throw, and to try and make sure that all of our comms are actually accessible. Like, I know that this isn't accessible, it's not going to have subtitles, there hasn't been any transcripts, and obviously, like, that's fair enough, but it would be good to, like, keep making progress in that area. And yeah, just holding lots more events. Working with the GU president is just fundamental, to be honest. Like, the bridge between CUSU and GU is so important, and that's something that is also involves the CUSU president. And I think a lot more can be done for grad students with the women's officer. So, for example, working more closely with the childcare office. Yeah, but with the DSO, I'm just so excited to be working with one. It's going to be so helpful. Like, it would be great to have that help with workload, because basically all disability-related work falls to me at the moment. So it would be really, really great to work with someone on that, rather than just doing it by myself and trying to share the work with them, which would mean that I could support welfare officers so much more than I can at the moment. And that's like just a really big priority for me at the moment, is being able to give welfare officers as much support to make their lives as easy as possible. Yeah, I guess some of the stuff the DSO could take on my behalf is working to ensure the existence of support groups for, like, students with different mental health conditions. The support groups can be such a lifeline for some of them. They were a lifeline for me, so I know, like, how important they are, but also, yeah, it's something that takes a lot of time. Like, working with them to make CUSU accessible would just be great, because otherwise it's sort of just me being like, guys, remember. And yeah, doing even more work on mental health is another thing that would be great to do with them.
Great. Okay, so we're just going to finish now on 2 questions that we've had sent in from students. So the first one is, how will you tackle the welfare gap between disabled and non-disabled students and make welfare provision accessible to disabled students?
Okay, so the welfare gap is something that's actually helped me in a way. Well, obviously it's not a good thing, but being able to show statistical data saying, look, there is this actual gap between, say, students with specific learning difficulties and students without specific learning difficulties, which we had from the National Student Survey data this year, was what meant that I could get compulsory training about, like, the responsibility of supervisors and DOSs to be following through with reasonable adjustments and student support documents earlier this term. So the welfare gap is something that I'm so conscious of, and I guess it exists because the rights of these students aren't being equally met. And I think that a huge part of that is learning difficulties and mental health, because statistically speaking, even though it's definitely not great to be having a disability that's mobility disability, because this is like the least accessible city ever, like, trying to get people to understand how many disabilities are unseen is really difficult. And yeah, it's another thing that the Accessible Education Pledge is working towards, and the Welfare Charter and Student-led Review is working towards. In terms of trying to make what provisions already there for disabled students more accessible, that's just a matter of trying to work out what the barriers preventing them from accessing it are and trying to bring them down. So one of the things I'm doing, I think I mentioned it, I can't remember now, is the app. Yeah, good. Which should make it a lot easier to ask for support, basically. It makes it literally like unlocking your iPhone and tapping a button. So that's really cool. And another thing I've done is, like, just trying to make it much clearer in general in the meantime while we're doing that, where to go for what. So I've linked up all of the support services. I've linked up Linkline and Peer-to-Peer and Student Minds and the advice service with all the welfare officers. But I've also linked up with the local NHS providers and the GPs and the nurses. So trying to make that all one connected mesh that catches everyone, rather than it sort of being if you don't happen to fall in the right place, you're just sort of lost. I hope is making welfare provision a bit more accessible, and yeah, just gathering as much testimony as I can to be able to show CUSU and to be able to show the university that there is a need to make things more accessible to disabled students, is my general way of going about things. And yeah, I guess I've also produced some guidance for people to be able to use officers, but also CUSU, and I've sent it around all the tutors as well, and the senior tutors, about just checklists that they can make sure that things are accessible. If you're doing an event, like, have you thought of this, for example, and the student support handbook, which just covers like A to Z of all things related to student welfare, and it's just great to have that thing in one place rather than having to look all over the place for it. I've done some ENTs as well, which I made sure accessible, so we do non-judgmental accessible yoga every Thursday, which is really, really nice. It's like a small group of people. It's not at all overwhelming. You just do what you feel comfortable with, and everyone there is going to respect that, and it's a really safe space. And yeah, just trying to always think about it. I mean, it's not that hard. It's just thinking about it. So
yeah, that's great. Okay, we're just going to do one final one really quickly, which is how will you plan to support and train welfare officers in your next year?
Okay, so I don't know. I've done a lot to do with training this year. Until previously, there was only sexual health training for welfare officers, which was something I was really surprised about when I was a welfare officer myself. But now I've linked up training with Linkline and peer-to-peer, and I've introduced a much wider range of training sessions. But I'm also very conscious that students don't have much time, and I also didn't have much time. So after the first time where I was trying to do them every week, I realized that was just not realistic. So now we have core training, which is the fundamental basics of being able to support someone. And then we have the extended training available, but it's an optional thing, for whoever's interested to be able to come. And we've got the Welfare Network Forum as well, which is a place where people can come and discuss ideas or tell me about what training they want me to be doing and when they want me to do it. So I can really make sure that I'm gearing everything towards welfare officers. Next term, next year, if I was elected, I just hope to really make sure that everything is tailored as much as possible for those officers. So trying to give them training about Freshers Week activities before Freshers Week itself, which is obviously impossible if you're newly elected, because you'd have to do it at the end of the next coming term. So yeah, that's a big one, because welfare officers have to do lots during Freshers Week, and things like campaign planning and putting things in place like having anonymous sexual health delivery systems, all things that you kind of can't really do in the middle of term because it's not really the right time for it, but would also be really useful over the course of the term. And yeah, I hope to develop the welfare handbook further and just do more of the same, planning their campaigns for them, writing bulletins for them, doing everything I can for them, basically.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming in, Poppy. That's it. In fact, that is our final one of our live stream debates. So thank you, everybody who's been watching. Just to remind you all that voting will open at midnight on Tuesday, the 1st of March, and will be closing at 7 p.m. on Thursday, the 3rd. So that is all from us. Thank you. Bye.